What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the Way of Wade All City 12. And with the popularity of the All City 11 line and just how far that shoe spans between sports from indoor and outdoor basketball, indoor and outdoor pickleball, and also tennis, it's going to always be interesting to see what they did with the next generation of the shoe. So let's see if it holds up. Here we go. And thanks to Way of Wade for sending me a pair of these over to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored, and of course, as always, all opinions are still my own. Now, my personal favorite part of the All City 12s actually is the uppers. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to look at in the midsole, Way of Wade shoes. There's always something to look at in the midsole. But the uppers, to me, on these were really efficiently engineered for, number one, containment, but also breathability, more importantly. Now, the one thing I did notice is me having a pretty high arch foot and high midfoot. The tongue on these is a little bit more thin, so that will need broken in if you are a high arch foot. If you're a neutral or flat arch player, I don't really think it's going to be a big deal. But the thing that you really got to look at is all the meshing that goes from the distal end of the heel all the way around the toe box, but then the reinforcing around the toe box with this really dense woven panel. The thing is, that woven panel, yes, it is really strong, and when you're pivoting, you can actually really feel it, containing. You can really feel the strength of it, but it's also pretty buttery feeling. There's really no break-in to this part of the shoe whatsoever. If you look at it on the breathability test, they only heated up 80.4 degrees, which is crazy for a shoe with this much going on, with this much maximalism in it. And when I had the heat gun on there, the heat was just blown out of both sides, as well as the toe box of the shoe. That's really backed up by the breathability mapping. You can see the fog is just pouring out of every part of the shoe. So especially for a line of shoes that is known for being a good outdoor shoe, if you're playing in these on really hot days, they're going to be breathing exceptionally well, even if you are in really thick socks or you're someone that produces a ton of heat. The other thing I like about this is the double heel counter. As you can see here, you get a really thick tab here in the heel counter. In some shoes that do this, it's really thin, whereas in this one, there is a ton of padding in there. And you're gonna start to get a really nice custom fit around that heel counter once this starts breaking in and once you start breaking in those uppers. Now, speaking of breaking the uppers, if you look at the upper durability test, 10-second highest grit sandpaper, the uppers do start to get pretty worked by the burr on this. Now, there is a lot of outsole tread that comes up over the top of these, so I would say if you're not an extreme dragger, you probably aren't going to get into that. But if you are and you really evert like crazy, you are going to start making these look a little weird. However, like I said, the burr did not get through it, but it is still going to look a little bit frayed if you're that kind of dragger. And so far as the containment goes in the uppers, these definitely have held their own in the line of All City shoes. These definitely have kind of picked up the torch from the 11s in terms of containment. They are excellent. That does have some implications for fit, which we will talk about once we get to the fit section. And getting into the midsole, the All City 12, once again, it is a full-length boom midsole. It is contained on the medial heel as well as lateral side by a TPU container that goes all the way around. That's going to give it a lot more energy return for sure. This does have a double shank. The shank on the top is pretty thick, kind of that normal butterfly shank you see on a lot of Wade shoes. And the bottom one is a longer shank, but it is much more flexible. It's got some serrations going into the forefoot, some break points. I mean, I do think it's continuous along the medial and lateral rails, but then it kind of breaks apart in the middle of the shoe to give it just a little bit more freedom of movement. You can be able to bend the shoe a little better. But in terms of this setup, and you look at it on the bounce height test, 40 centimeters in the heel, 42 in the forefoot, as well as the stack that's in the forefoot in the heel. This is one of the most protective foams you're going to get out there, especially with the double shank in there, really keeping the resilience of that foam over the life of the shoe. So in terms of a shoe that's got a ton of containment, but also a lot of a diving board effect, and as we'll see in the outsole tread section, some wicked speed, it really is one of those shoes, once again, just like the All City 11, that just kind of really hit that sweet spot in terms of maximalism, but also a lot of pop. But speaking of that outsole tread, if you look at just the general makeup of it, it is just this broken apart herringbone pattern going all the way from the heel to the forefoot. It is a continuous tread pattern, then a really far posterior rocker, and then some linear tread going on the medial and lateral rails of it. You can also see some of the TPU on that bottom-loaded shank coming out here in the outsole tread. Now, this tread is super chunky and performs just as well on indoor as outdoor courts, as a lot of All City shoes do. But if you look at the grip test ramp, they didn't slip until 42 degrees on that, which makes them one of the better shoes out there. And even after getting them a little bit dirty, they still had really good grip. Even on outdoor courts, I was on a cold outdoor painted court, which is actually pretty slippery every time I use it and when I go to that particular court, and these ones really had no issues. So In terms of sure-footedness, combining the uppers with the stability of the midsole as well as the grip of the outsole tread, these are definitely one of the most sure-footed shoes I have ever put on. That includes the All City 11 and 11 V2. Now, if you look at the speed ratio of these, kind of tells the same story. Comes in at a 2.91, which is really good, and that really comes down to the Boom midsole. But those double shanks are creating a lot of kinetic energy from all that potential energy that they're allowing that foam to store, especially with a TPU rail on the lateral side of the shoe. So really, it really doesn't matter if you're going long distance down the court or short distance for pickleball. These things are going to give a ton back to you, especially if you are putting a lot into them. Now, if you look at the Outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, really not even a millimeter of damage on these. The durometer is nice and high like on most Wade shoes. So I'd say for outdoor shoes, this is, like, once again, one of the better ones out there, combining the breathability, durability, and, like I said, sure-footedness even on slick painted courts. But the one thing that was a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde about the All City 12 was its fit. Now, these come measured width-wise at a 9.4 centimeter for a size 11 foot, which should be on the the real wide end of shoes. However, if you look at the bottom of them, you can see they are pretty inflared and they taper really hard in the forefoot. And even if you look at the insole of them, they taper pretty good too. So that combined with the TPU rail here on the lateral side, if you're somebody with a tailor's bunion, that's where you're going to start to get a little bit of a mismatch. Or you're somebody that doesn't match up with the inflare of the shoe, that's where the mismatch in size is going to be. So I'd say a narrow and medium foot for sure, you can just go true to size. A 2E, I do think can break this in over time at their standard size. But if you're a 2E and want the comfort and easier break-in, I would just say go up a half size. A 4E, I'd be trying to go up one size on these. But even at that, I think you are going to have some break-in. Like I said, they taper a little bit more than the All City 11s do, and I just wasn't used to that. When I had these on, at first they felt fantastic. Once my left foot started to swell up a little bit more, and that's my little bit of a wider foot, that's when I got the cramping. It did start to get a little bit better as I broke the shoe in. So that's why I said, you can at a 2E break these in, I think, but it might be a little bit more of an extended break-in. So just watch out for that in terms of your sizing versus some previous Wade shoes you may have had on your foot. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, like most of these shoes that have this setup, they're pretty much good for everything from Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, ball of foot pain, ankle sprainers, whatever. These are some of the better shoes out there. I still think an orthotic in these takes these up even another level, makes them, probably the most elite shoe out there for any snake bites on your foot. These ones and the AG4 from 361. So really anything besides like bunions and tailor's bunions, like big lumps and bumps in your forefoot, these are going to be pretty good for. The playability of the All City 12s, I'm sure a lot of you can guess what I'm about to say about these, but if you want a sure-footed shoe, this is it. They have the launch of, a really, just jump-focused shoe. They've got the containment of a super maximalist shoe, and they have the speed of a more speed-focused shoe. I think with the taper in these, I think Wade was trying to make the shoe a little bit easier to go, north to south in versus, I'd say, the All City 11, which that shoe was quick side to side. It wasn't the quickest thing going up and down the court, whereas these, I think, are meant to be a little bit more streamlined. Like I said, I think in terms of fit, that's gonna do some things for some people, but in terms of the performance, you can definitely tell these things are easier to get up and down the court. In terms of the break-in that way, like in terms of bending it break-in, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, there really is none. They're super buttery going up and down the court and side to side. And like I said, the sure-footedness, being able to pop off of one leg, or just really know that if you're gonna try to come to a really screeching halt, especially someone like me, who's got a little bit clunkier footwork, yeah, I know, and a little bit heavier, where there's a lot of weight coming down on that one foot, it's nice to have the confidence of these. I think anybody from a really shifty guard to a center can put these on, really any position you want. There really isn't a best position for these, and there really isn't a best court for these either. I think they do their best work on hot, humid days on really unforgiving outdoor courts, just because I think that's where they shine the most. So, like I said, I think once again from this line, it's continuing to get refined. I think some people are going to have an issue with the fit versus maybe the All City 11 V1. In terms of its fit to the All City 11 V2, it actually is pretty similar. So I'd say if you like the V2's fit more than the V1 on the 11s, you're probably just going to go with the same size you went with those. If you liked the 11 V1 more than the V2, that's maybe where you go up the half size. So that's, or the one size, you know, whatever kind of foot you are. So I'd say it's probably the best indicator of what size you should get for these is kind of where you fell on the All City 11 V1 versus V2. Love to hear your thoughts on the 12s. If you think they are an upgrade from the 11s, let me know down below. And if you want to see one of the recent siblings to the All City 12, the Way of Wade Shadow 5 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.